My mic's in. My weed is rolled. Yeah. Here we go. From the darkness, from the porch. I'm going to come to y'all again from my studio when it's set back up from my move. But it ain't no studio for at least a week or two or three. Well, no, I probably could get the studio set up by Tuesday night, but nah. Maybe. Dallas, we are coming to you live from Dallas next Friday. Get your tickets. If you haven't gotten your tickets for next Friday's show in Dallas, get them now. Friday, Dallas, me, Kamira White, Mike Murphy, Larry Goodwell, and Slink Johnson. Yeah. Doesn't happen. The Denver Nuggets is what happened to the Lakers, my brother. The Nuggets are a better team. Top to bottom. Lakers ain't got nothing for Jamal Murray. Lakers ain't got nothing for Jamal Murray. You know? Nothing. What up, Aaron? What's up, Dr. Sinister? We're here. See my face, niggas? Like, people always be like, when I talk from the dark, we don't see your face. Why are you hiding? Because I get high. And I ain't having no fucking lights on in my eyes when I get high. Want to see how I look? There you go, nigga. Ladies. There you go. I ain't gonna have no goddamn lights in my... Oh, shit. Let me make sure my mic is voice isolation's on. Yep, voice isolation's on. We hear from the new porch. I like my new porch. It's not done up yet, but my shit's enclosed. I'm gonna have this shit done. I'm putting some rocking chairs in this motherfucker. I think before everything is said and done, I'm gonna go down to the Cracker Barrel and get some of them old school Cracker Barrel rocking chairs to put up in this bitch. But we're talking about Jim Brown and sports in general. And the reason why this is a title for tonight, is because I've been watching sports all day. I've been watching sports all day. Having a good, I've been moving all day, but I started moving this morning like at 6 in the morning. Like I was moving from like 6 to like 3. After 3 o'clock, I've been watching sports. From the Preakness, motherfucking Laker game, the Devin Hay fight, and it got me thinking about what's going on in sports and how we lost Jim Brown yesterday, and how we haven't had anyone measure up to Jim Brown since Jim Brown. You know, because Jim Brown was one of many at a time in sports. You gotta look. Before Jim Brown, there was a man named Paul Robeson. Paul Robeson was not only the most famous athlete of his day. He ended up becoming a famous singer and actor. Paul Robeson is who Dr. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X looked up to. And Jim Brown and Bill Russell and Kareem and Muhammad Ali. That whole class between Jim Brown, Muhammad Ali, Bill Russell, their OG was Paul Robeson. And if you don't know who Paul Robeson is, that's Robeson with no R. Robeson. Robeson. Yeah, Robeson. No R. So look him up. Paul Robeson was so great, they had to silence his ass. All they said was Paul Robeson went to a dinner in Russia. And mind you, he had good relations with the Russians. So no one thinks the Russians were the people that poisoned Paul Robeson, even though he got poisoned in Russia. Nobody thinks that the Russians did it, because the Russians had a great relationship with Paul Robeson. Everybody think you know who did it. And for those of you who ever hear of something called the MK Ultra plan, for those of you who understand that, and for those of you who don't, look it up. They'll dismiss it as a theory, but too many men and women have fallen short due to this thing. But it is suspected and assumed and widely acknowledged that Paul Robeson was poisoned, possibly due through that MK Ultra plan. We don't know for sure, but he basically was poisoned in 1960, and then came back here to California and Santa Monica and lived a life of recluse and paranoia until he died, I think, in 1974. But before Paul Robeson was poisoned, he was very active in the betterment of black society. And from Paul Robeson, you get the Jim Brown, Muhammad Ali era. That was out of Paul Robeson. So Jim Brown stands and stood on the shoulders of giants. And I think, unfortunately, no one stands on his shoulders. And I say that unfortunately. Also, I have a sponsor that is willing to sponsor some readings for my loyal listeners. So if you want a sponsored 1 hour reading, email me info@breakthroughcards.com. Email me. If you want a sponsored 1 hour reading, that is a $350 value. Go to breakthroughcards.com. And you'll see my email. You can also contact me. Go to breakthroughcards.com. Go to where it says contact. There you'll see my email address. And if you want to be one of the people who gets a free reading, go to breakthroughcards.com and hit me up. But back to what we saying. What's up, Pete Ross saying? So what we saw is there was once an era of black athletes that understood that they were more than athletes and had a sense of community to the greater good of black society. Now, I'm not saying there are not athletes that do their part, because they most definitely are athletes that do their part. I'm not saying that. Why am I saying Jim Brown's the last of it? Jim Brown was the best of the best of the best. He was the best football player in NFL history, according to those who saw him. He played before I was born. I've seen the highlights. I know he played 9 years and held all the records that it took other players 12, 13, 14 years to break. But Jim Brown was bigger than sports. He went on to become a great actor. Great actor, especially for an athlete. And that's where I intersected with Jim Brown, was through the movies. I wasn't around when he played, but I did see him in the movies. And at the top of his game, he still fought for black people. Jim Brown was the best of the best. Yet he put his people first. And he did it. Think about when Jim Brown still played football, America was still in Jim Crow when he played. Think about that for a second. America was still in its Jim Crow era when Jim Brown played football. He got to the top and he brought his people with him without fear of retribution. There's an old term back in the day. Peter Ross, you from Cleveland. See, you from Cleveland, I'm from LA. I'm gonna get to my LA connection to him. I wish I had a call-in show right now. If my studio was set up, I would have it call-in because I would love to hear from you guys. Especially you, Pete, because you from Cleveland. But I'm from LA, and Jim Brown lived in LA. So his impression on LA was huge. But I'll get to LA. I want to finish my point. My point was about athletes, and remind me later to get to his connection to LA. And my personal, well, not personal connection, but connection to him. Jim Brown played during Jim Crow. And he put it on the line for us, for me, for you. Jim Brown put it on the line for us, y'all. He put it on the line for us. Jim Brown gave us his life. And that's why I feel like such a shithead for last night not acknowledging Jim Brown on my live. And I have tonight because that's a God right there. Now, he had his faults like we all do. There are going to be those out there, and I'm going to just rebuff and mitigate the bullshit people who come back that like to be contrarian for attention. Jim Brown, yes, he had a history of domestic violence. I'm not excusing that. But let's tell the truth. It's not my place to either excuse or not excuse. I think that's where we as humans get our egos overinflated. You'll get some people that be like, man, I ain't rocking with such, man. I ain't never messing with somebody that could do this and do that. I can't excuse that. Well, I seriously doubt they asked for your pardon, but okay, thank you. It's two things. They didn't ask, and I don't care. So why are you telling me this? I understand it's me. I don't have the authority to either accept or reject another man's behavior. Why? Let's break this down. One, you can't control the next person. Two, you don't know what their situation is. That man played football for 9 years. I say this. I don't believe in domestic violence. But at the same time, if I had a daughter, or if I'm in ear's reach of any woman that trusts what I have to say, I would say be cautious about marrying a football player or a boxer. Why? Because football players and boxers, they resolve conflict through physical means. Police officers too. If a person's job requires them to be physical, then they're probably bringing those ass whoopings home. I'm not saying all, but I'm quite sure upwards of 40%. You get someone who's been taught their whole life to resolve conflict through hitting an object or hitting another person with some shoulder pads and a helmet on, or hitting someone else with boxing gloves on. I can almost guarantee, I won't say almost guarantee, but it's for certain that that person might resolve conflict through physical means. So my solution to that is watch who you link up with. Because I'm going to tell you something about men. Like, sometimes women hear me, a man say that. This part here is for the ladies. This part here is specifically for the ladies. Women oftentimes say things like, it sounds like you excusing a man's behavior, or men don't protect black women, or men, I don't care what it is, a man shouldn't do fill in the blank. A lot of women say that. I don't care what it is, a man shouldn't, and then they fill in the blank whatever they think he shouldn't do. Ladies, let me tell you how men think. Men don't try other men. Well, I'm not talking about these internet niggas. I'm talking about real men who understand life outside of the internet. Niggas like me. You don't step, my dad used to always tell me, you don't step on another man's toes, because you in control to how long his fuse is and what light his fuse. Every man got a fuse. This is how my father raised me. My father used to say, every man has a fuse. Don't light it. And this is how men think about other men. Men who can defend ourselves. I don't like the fuse of niggas I know I can whoop. Why? Because I know men have lines, man. Men have lines. And when those lines get crossed, however shallow or deep that line is, it can possibly be a physical altercation. That's one side of the point of view. The other side of the point of view is, some of these niggas are just crazy. And they like easy wins, fighting women and shit. Both things are true. You have some niggas who are just crazy, who go around whooping ass. You know? And you got some who just respond to their environment. So I said that to say, you know, Jim Brown is who he is on a personal level. Let me tell you something about life, y'all. Some people aren't going to be the best humans you want them to be on a family level. Oftentimes, people with the biggest public persona have screwed up family dynamics. So if you're one of those people who want to you want to get hung up over Jim Brown and some of his issues that he had domestically, have at it. I'm not gonna tell you not to do it. You have to be true to your consciousness. Just don't bring that bullshit to my page and think you're gonna have somebody that has a listening ear. If you bring it to my page, you're gonna find somebody that can't find 1/3 of a fuck to give. You're right, Biz Marty. Two men understand that, okay, at some point, we got to mitigate this conflict. Because men kill each other, flat out. Ladies, I'm sorry to tell you that. But this is something that other men understand about ourselves. All right? And I understand there's some women who weren't told this. And yes, you have gentlemen like me. And a lot of other gentlemen out here. Most men are gentlemen. Most men won't do nothing to you like that. But there are a fair amount of men who are evil, who have ulterior motives, man. They have nefarious dealings. Those men exist too. All right? So the way men are raised is, it's just best you don't find out and keep it cool. And to the Jim Brown situation, and then when you're dealing with somebody who has a history of domestic violence, then there's your indicator right there. If you still sign up to be with that, then more power to you. What's up, Knockout Noda? What's up, McCoy? Hey, salute to the chat room, man. I be going off on these tangents. Y'all know me when I go on my tangents, I don't look at the chat room because y'all be saying some funny shit and it'll throw me off. This shit, it'll legit throw me off. Biz Marty, you said, hey, Biz Marty, man, can you email me that? I'm gonna screenshot that. I never saw that movie. The Duelist, I've never seen that. I appreciate that. Yeah, that's right, McCoy. Jim Brown represented an era where you had to be manly to attract women, and you wanted to attract women. And when I say manly, I'm not talking about this hyper masculine dude that we see today. I'm talking about chill and relax. Hey, fellas, and hopefully you niggas ain't the one I'm talking about. But you ever be at a shindig, at an event or whatever, or just kind of chilling, and there's ladies that are there, and it's some dudes that are over there being goofy and loud. It's like, nigga, hey, dog, bruh, it's women here. Stop that silly shit and chill. That's who Jim Brown was. Stop all that silly shit, nigga, and chill. And for those of you just coming in who are interested in my card readings, I have a handful of sponsored readings. A sponsor of mine is giving out. So email me, breakthroughcards.com. Man, see, I wish I was on my computer right now. I would read Jim Brown's cards. I would read his cards if I was on my computer. But I'm not. I'm going to see if I can set my computer up tomorrow night. Well, my computer's set up and my mic is set up. It's just the acoustics in there is a bitch. I'm going to see if I can. I'm going to see. I'm going to test my mic out tomorrow. But anyway, see, Jim Brown, he came from that era to where It wasn't no funny business, and that era needs to come back. Because I respect anybody and what they feel. If you feel like you're non-binary, fine. If you feel like you're LGBTQ, fine. Everything is fine. Other than pedophilia, I don't fuck with pedophiles. Outside of anybody who deals with kids, if your sexual habits involve two consenting adults, whatever that be, I'm cool with you. But just as respect is received, respect must be given. Do you dig? And Jim Brown was that. And growing up here in LA, he was always a part of the. Jim Brown was a part of the fabric of LA. It's like, I remember back in the 80s and 90s, outside of the movies, I knew Jim Brown from always being on the news. Like here in South Central, let me give y'all my Jim Brown stories. I knew Jim Brown from when the Channel 9 News, Jerry Dunphy and Pat Harvey sit on the news too, looking like a beautiful black woman. On the Channel 9 News, it'd be like, back in the early 90s and in the 90s, when the Lakers played road games, they played on Channel 9. And the road game usually started about 5 or 6 o'clock. And the Lakers would play, then after the Lakers was Channel 9 News. And Jim Brown was always on Channel 9 News giving away food at this gang intervention. I remember when the riots hit. When the riots hit, Jim Brown was out there, man. Jim Brown was always, my childhood memories of Jim Brown was a black man doing his best to bring peace to the streets. That was my childhood growing up seeing Jim Brown. I got to see this man's man using his. I didn't know Jim Brown, the football player. I barely knew him, the actor. My movie, Original Kings, that was funny. I like that. But that movie came out like, I was seeing Jim Brown in the news. I was 8, 9 years old. That was before Original Kings. And my father would tell me who Jim Brown was. So I got to see Jim Brown always on the streets here in South Central LA addressing gang issues that I had to deal with all the time as a kid. Not directly, but indirectly, hearing all the gunshots. Well, a couple drive-bys did hit my house. So that's who Jim Brown was. And then my elementary school, Coliseum Elementary, for when our 6th grade graduation came, all of us kids who acted good, Jim Brown used to offer up his house, his home, for our 6th grade, for our elementary school. There's one girl named Portia ran through, I never forget, there's one girl named Portia that went to my elementary school. She was running through Jim Brown's house, and he had this extremely clean glass window right by the pool. And she ran through that motherfucker. And when I was a kid, I wanted to go to Jim Brown's house because my dad used to always tell me about all the parties at Jim Brown's house. We here, did we go blank? We good? We here? This shit went blank like a motherfucker. I hit the lock button on my phone. We here? So my dad used to always, back when I was a kid, he and my uncle, they'd always talk about going to Jim Brown's house and all the parties at Jim Brown's house in the 70s. How back in the 70s you had to park your car down on Sunset, and then Jim Brown had a limousine take everybody up to the house. My dad used to talk a lot about the Jim Brown parties. Even to this day, I was talking to my dad. You remember that time I told you I almost got in a fight with them 8 niggas? Man, that was at Jim Brown's house. The only reason why it didn't happen because I heard my dad saying that. My dad, my dad was in the streets back in the 70s. And he was with my cousin Fred. And Fred was a wild card. Fred used to do all kind of shit to people. And my Uncle Fred whooped somebody's ass. And so my dad, what the story goes, my dad used to always tell me, Fred whooped somebody's ass. And that particular person saw Fred at Jim Brown's house and my dad. And the dude came up to my dad and was like, we not gonna handle this here. But when we get to the bottom of the hill, it's on. Look, I'm giving y'all this is some true foundational Black American freedman, Black American Los Angeles shit going on right here. This is how black folks got down in the 70s. My dad said it was like 8 of them, and it was just my dad and my Uncle Fred. And it was 8 of them other niggas. And then my dad said when dude came up to him and said that, he knew it was true, possibly, because my Uncle Fred was always whooping somebody's ass. This is how cold my Uncle Fred was. Rest in peace. We had the same birthday. He was a king of clubs like me. My Uncle Fred was so cold. When he worked for the RTD, the bus line here in LA, in the 80s, some Mexican lady cussed him out and threw a soda can at him. My Uncle Fred parked the bus and whooped her ass. I'm like, come on, Uncle Fred. Uncle Fred got all kind of ass whooping stories. He got stories of whooping niggas' asses. My Uncle Fred was so cold when my dad and him was learning karate, was doing karate back in the 70s. They both were trained under Chuck Norris in the early 70s. My Uncle Fred was so cold with it. When he started seeing Jim Kelly get put in all those movies, my Uncle Fred used to enroll in the same tournament Jim Kelly would be in so he could whoop Jim Kelly's ass. That's how I'm rest in peace, Uncle Fred. He died he died of a heart attack suddenly, I think it was a 2010, 9. He was preaching the word, and right when he finished preaching, he walked off the pulpit and fell and died of a heart attack. To this day, I miss Uncle Fred. Rest in peace, Uncle Fred. I love Fred. I wish I could hear his voice now. But this is how Fred was. Fred was a man of his word. My Uncle Fred. My dad told me it was some dude that kind of did him wrong in 71. And he told that dude, the next time I see you, I'm whooping your ass. My dad said Uncle Fred didn't see that man again until 1980. And what did my Uncle Fred do? Whoop his ass. And then after he finished whooping his ass, he told him, I told you the next time I see you, I'm going to whoop your ass. That was Uncle Fred. Well, at Jim Brown's house, somebody that Fred whooped had his whole crew with them. And they was ready to stomp out my Uncle Fred and my father. Because my father was with Uncle Fred. My dad is a man of substance. My dad raised me the same. He lived the same way he raised me. If I come to the party with you, I'm leaving with you. A lot of you niggas were left. And Uncle Fred told my dad, you can leave. But the reason why this whole interaction didn't happen was because they were at Jim Brown's house. The man wanted to fight my Uncle Fred and jump him, but he didn't jump him, and the crew didn't jump my Uncle Fred and my dad because they had such level of respect for Jim Brown. They said, we're not going to do this thing at Jim Brown's house. My dad, Jim Brown had limos that would pick you up on Sunset, take you up to his house. Because if you've never been to LA, the Hollywood Hills, you can't. It's not good parking in the Hollywood Hills. So valet service is like almost a must if you're going to have a party. But my dad always talked about how classy Jim Brown was when he would go to his house for parties. Do you know that Jim Brown is responsible for Earth, Wind, and Fire? Maurice White, the founder and the band leader for Earth, Wind, and Fire, had a concept called Earth, Wind, and Fire. It wasn't a reality yet. Maurice White was the drummer for Ramsey Lewis. Rest in peace, Ramsey Lewis. And if you don't know who Ramsey Lewis is, shame on you. Ramsey Lewis is one of the icons in jazz. He made cover tunes popular. Ramsey Lewis in the late 60s, what he would do was, if there's a popular R&B song or folk, whatever song, Ramsey Lewis would rush to make a jazz cover. And he's a very famous, popular. He was a pop jazz artist. In the 60s, jazz wasn't pop. And this gets back to Jim Brown, Wait on Me. There was only one time in American history that jazz was pop music, and that was during the swing era of the 30s and the 40s. Outside of that, jazz was never the pop music. Ramsey Lewis found a way to go pop in the 60s with jazz. Who was Ramsey Lewis's drummer? Maurice White, the band leader and founder of Earth, and Fire. According to Maurice White in his own book. Go read his book if you want to verify what I'm saying. You know, leaving Ramsey Lewis was a major financial risk for him because Ramsey Lewis was guaranteed money. So Maurice White had this concept called Earth and Fire where he wanted to fuse rhythm and blues with Afro-Cuban sounds and world beat. And he put a band together, and Jim Brown was the first to sign him. And when Jim Brown signed Earth and Fire, he is the one that Earth and Fire was playing a party at Jim Brown's house. And Clive Davis was there. And Clive Davis signed them. But that didn't happen he signed them under Jim Brown's management. And if you read Maurice White's book, Jim Brown was just too busy to manage Earth and Fire. Earth and Fire was a building act, and Jim Brown was acting. He was doing the football analysis. He just didn't have the time to really build another band and promote them properly. So he put them with someone who could, Clive Davis. Hey, Sun Goddess by Earth and Fire and Ramsey Lewis is one of my favorite songs ever. Will you, but will pop that out, I love that shit. But that's who Jim Brown was. No athlete of today compares. None. Now the last 40, 50 years, none. So we must pay proper respect to Jim Brown. Let's respect him. Let's love him. Let's appreciate him. Let's thank him. Because if you don't honor your greats, you won't have any more greats. And we got too many greats we already don't honor enough. Honor Jim Brown for putting his life and legacy on the line for us. And again, I have a sponsor that's willing to give away some free readings. Email me info@DwannB.com or go to breakthroughcards.com and look me up, hit contact. And I'll be drawing the decision either Monday or Tuesday. All right? Salute to Jim Brown. He's the last of an icon. He's the icon of a century. So only going to be one or two like him. So let's thank him for the time that he gave us. You dig? What's up, Jay Jimerson? See you in Dallas. And so get my tickets. Dallas. 6 days from now. All right? I'll holler at y'all tomorrow.